Tonight I want to tell you a story. But first, I want to introduce you to a gorilla. This is Coco. Some of you might remember her. Coco became world famous in the 1970s and 80s because she was the first gorilla in history who was able to speak to humans. Coco had learned sign language. She'd mastered a vocabulary of thousands of signs in order to communicate in complex and abstract ways that no one believed possible before. She got a cover story in National Geographic. There was a children's book written about her, a PBS television special, an award-winning documentary, and much more. The coverage of Coco was heartwarming and immensely popular. People could not get enough of the moving and inspiring stories of Coco the talking gorilla. And there was just one problem. It wasn't true. Sorry. Everyone loved the idea of a talking gorilla so much that we were willing to overlook mounting evidence that the accounts of her ability to communicate with humans had been greatly exaggerated, and at least in a few cases, completely made up. But we wanted them to be true because they were great stories. They touched something deep inside of us. They satisfied some romantic notions we have about the interconnectedness of the natural world. And the fact that they weren't true was less important than the impact they had on our hearts and minds. In the years since Coco, Americans haven't lost our willingness to believe that all kinds of compelling stories are true, even when faced with proof to the contrary. Today, our nation is growing increasingly credulous. Biblical literalism and fundamentalism are on the rise in religious communities. People of all political persuasions appear more and more willing to believe in dangerous rumors and conspiracy theories. For better or worse, ours is a nation of believers and not skeptics. And this comes naturally to us as a species because stories are one of the primary mechanisms we use to make sense of the world, to understand ourselves and the purpose of our lives, whether or not the stories are actually true. Because even fairy tales can communicate profound truths about the way the world works. As Neil Gaiman writes, fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. This is something unique about the human experience. We do something that no other animal does. In every culture, everywhere around the world, we humans are storytelling animals. We are the only creatures on Earth that tell each other stories in order to understand the kind of creatures that we are. And this is not just a social observation, it's a physiological one too. Our bodies have been tuned by millions of years of evolution to be emotionally engaged by stories. We can use functional MRI scans to watch the brain activate when a person listens to a story. While we're listening, our bodies react almost as if we were responding to real-life stimuli. If we read about a delicious meal, we may start to salivate. If we read about conflict between two characters, our palms will start to sweat and the muscles in our shoulders or abdomen tense up. If the story ends happily, our limbic system will dump a payload of dopamine into the bloodstream, and our emotional state will come to align with the feelings being experienced by the characters on the page. If it ends in tragedy, our left prefrontal cortex lights up, just as if we were personally experiencing sadness or loss. In fact, I don't even have to tell you a sad story to evoke those neurochemical processes. I can just remind you that you heard it once a long time ago and your body will still respond. When I started tonight by telling you that I wanted to tell a story, there was a subtle but powerful change that took place inside both of us. The intimate transaction of sharing a story is transformational. It forges a link that unites the storyteller with the listener. Great stories drill deep into the soul. They chisel up a pathway between hearts. They allow us to experience other worlds that would be otherwise inaccessible to us. They let us remember, in a sense, things that happened long before we were born and set our expectations for what will happen after we are gone. Every Passover, we relive the Jewish history of suffering and liberation by building an entire evening around a ritualized retelling of the Exodus. We pray in a sanctuary that is visually oriented toward the container that holds the scrolls of our stories. When our babies are born, when they become adults, when we are married and when we are buried, a rabbi or a cantor will stand nearby and recite words that remind us that we are all characters in an epic story that began thousands of years ago in the Fertile Crescent of the ancient Near East. We are the characters in this story, but we are also its authors, writing one day after another into existence. We compose the plot and dialogue, every line changing the course of what will follow after. I love you. I'm sorry. I promise. Our stories weave and wind around each other, conflict and resolution, uncertainty and revelation, moving steadily forward, propelled by the things we want, the things we lack, the things we dream about. And on this day, this Rosh HaShanah, this whole year lying open before us like a fresh blank page, what will be written on it? What stories and adventures, what losses or triumphs? We might worry that we won't make the right choice. Maybe we feel trapped by the inertia of who we've been in the past. Maybe we worry that real change and renewal are closed off to us. But with these blank pages, we can do anything we want. At the end of Avinu Malkeinu, we plead with God, Chonenu va'anenu, be gracious and merciful. Ki ein banu ma'asim, because when we look back, we see that we deserve no credit for the deeds we've done over the past year. But I wonder if that line, ein banu ma'asim, could be understood differently, looking forward instead of back. None of our deeds in the year ahead is predetermined. We don't know yet what choices and accomplishments will be accounted to our credit. So please, Chonenu va'anenu, God, give us a chance to share with you the unforgettable stories we will write in this new year. Every day is a new page. The choices we make about how to fill each one up determines how the chronicles of our lives will read when we are gone. Will we be remembered for having been generous or stingy, kind or cruel, humble or egotistical? There's still time for our stories to turn out any way we want. It is never too improbable or too late for transformation. One last point. Every good story needs an audience. All of us share a primal need, I think, to be understood, to feel that our stories matter and that they deserve to be heard. This year, I hope that you'll make time to tell your story and that you'll choose to do it here. Our congregational life is vibrant and exciting and filled with opportunities for you to get involved, as you heard Stuart remind us earlier this evening. There are chances here to build new relationships and strengthen old ones. What happens here doesn't happen in very many other places in our society. The ability to participate in the stories of people who we would never encounter otherwise. This community is filled with remarkable people whose lives and spiritual journeys are unique and wonderful. When we get to know them and when they get to know us, our stories are bound together in a kind of sacred anthology. Monologue becomes conversation. That's what's magic about a place like this. This is a place for stories to be gathered. Stories about people finding new love and new hope. People coming through remarkable recoveries from pain and unthinkable loss. Here we share space with those who have undertaken brave choices and made dramatic new beginnings, those who have more slowly and gently arrived at deeper understandings of themselves by building lives shaped by study, service, and prayer. And this is a place where your story can be told too. Please bring them here and share them bountifully with each other. On the high holy days, we pray that God will inscribe us in the book of life. But let us remember that we are not just that great book's subject, we are its authors too. And what we choose to write in it will be the truest story of our lives that will unfold in the new year. Whatever we wish can be inscribed in the pages unfurling before us. The future begins tonight, and it is woven from threads of pure possibility. It is time to tell your story. I cannot wait to hear it. And I pray that in this new year, all of us will live happily ever after. Shana Tova, everyone.